everyone, welcome back to Busy Garden Life. I am in the garden and checking out my tomato plants. So as you know, or if you've seen before, we lost a lot of them in the storm and they all seem to be coming back pretty well. I got a few from other people and then I tried to plant some from seed. And the ones from seed are obviously a little bit slower and not as big, but some of the other ones are doing great. But as I'm checking some of them, I noticed today we are starting to get the aphids. Now it's near the end of July, so I don't remember from last year whether or not we started getting them earlier. I felt like we did, but maybe not. So I am out here today with my neem oil spray. Now, there are some people that are against using any types of spray and will try to do anything natural, which is great. Last year, we actually had quite a few ladybugs and daddy longlegs out in the garden. And so I would always just take them and put them right on my tomato plants, which seemed to help, but I still had to spray a little bit. But for me, with the busy life, neem oil is great. It's still considered organic, so it's something that I feel comfortable using. That way I know that I'm still not putting anything dangerous on my plants, which then land into my kids' bodies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to just spray all of my plants vigorously, top of the leaves, bottom of the leaves, and just kind of saturate as much as I can to control the aphids. Now there is an area where there doesn't seem to be any aphids. Now I don't know if it's because they're next to my borage plants, which tend to attract a lot of them as well, or if they just kind of haven't made their way that way. I'm not sure, but needless to say, I'm going to go ahead and just spray all of the tomato plants in order to try to get this under control before it ends up taking all of my tomatoes and before a lot of the tomatoes really start coming out. So for me, it's still early enough that I only have maybe a quarter of the tomato plants that are actually producing tomatoes. A lot of the other ones are getting flowers on them, and some of them are still kind of growing. So I just kind of have a wide range of tomatoes this year. So let's just spray them all, get them all going, and we will see how it does. Okay, so as I am going through my tomato plants and putting the neem oil on, I am also pruning them. So pruning them helps to keep some of the pests down because there's not as many leaves, right? But ultimately, pruning them also helps your fruit to ripen a little bit better. Now, last year, as my first year in the garden, I tried to research it all, and I was told, or I learned basically that you only have to prune your indeterminate tomatoes, meaning the tomatoes that keep growing. Cherry tomatoes, for example, keep growing. Your beefsteak and delicious tomatoes will keep growing up to 12, 13 feet tall sometimes. So I had always kept thinking I need to prune those, which weren't very many in my garden. And then your paste tomatoes are typically your determinate, where they don't just keep growing, they kind of stop growing at some point in time and just produce the fruit on them. So I felt, because I had mostly Romas and Amish patience San Marzano, that I didn't really need to prune them. And this year I decided that's not the case. And it has made a world of difference already, and I hardly have any fruit on them. So I prune off the bottoms, any of the dead leaves. I prune off the suckers. So I will show you what a sucker is. Here's a big cherry tomato tree. Actually, I think this is a beefsteak tomato. And you can see right here, there's no fruit on there. It's basically what we call a tomato sucker. So I'll just go through. Here's another one here. Kind of that one's a large branch. I'm just going to come close and trim it. So you can get quite a few of them. I've got a lot lower that I'm gonna grab as well. But ultimately, here I can do it on a smaller plant for you too. So if I look kind of on the bottom here, here's one that I'm just going to come in and cut off. Couple all the way, oh, I'm gonna leave that one on. Here's one that's kind of drooping. I'm gonna go through and cut all these ones off that are drooping. So basically, those tree suckers can just take the nutrients away from your fruit. And last year I had, took so long for a lot of my tomatoes to ripen, and now I'm wondering if it's because I didn't prune and they were so bushy and full of suckers and leaves that a lot of the nutrients the plant was trying to feed the whole plant instead of just the fruit. So I'll be anxious to see if that helps a little bit more this year. One of my cherry tomato trees is already ripening and turning red, so I'm starting to think that that might have been the case last year. Last year I was pulling them off of the vine before they would completely ripen in order to take them inside so they wouldn't get eaten by bugs or worms or what have you. So this year, if I give you one advice regarding the tomatoes, is start pruning them early, right off the bat. Get those suckers off, get those trees or those leaves that are getting yellow or even just drooping and touching the ground, cut them right off. And then it allows those tomatoes to just ripen a little bit better and you have a healthier plant. Not to mention, next year I'm going to be able to plant a lot more. So you don't have to plant them so far apart because they're pruned and more contained. Now some of my larger plants, the cherry tomatoes and beefsteak, I probably will because they still get pretty big. But my Romas and my San Marzano and Armush paste that are a little bit more contained because I've been pruning them, I can plant them a little bit closer together because they're growing more up as opposed to out and all over the place. So let's go ahead and let's finish pruning and putting neem oil all over our tomato plants, and then we'll be done for this week on the tomatoes. All right, I also want to try to show you this aphid if I can on the tomato plant. They're small, tiny bug. There were a couple, and after I pruned it off, it fell off. But that's what we're trying to get rid of because they will overtake the whole plant. Now I'm going to take this directly to the chickens and I'm going to feed the plant and the aphids to the chickens, and hopefully they'll help control them as well. And that is it. They are pruned and everything is sprayed with neem oil. Now I do want to talk a little bit more about how I care for my tomatoes because again, it's something that I've just kind of been learning. We try to do everything organic as much as possible. So to fertilize it, I don't typically use even organic fertilizer. I use homemade fertilizer. I keep our eggshells and I crush them up and I put them at the base of tomato plants, and this helps to prevent bottom rot tomatoes. So last year I didn't have a problem with it. I don't know if it's because I did the eggshells or not, but it wasn't a problem. So of course this year I'm doing the same thing. Now if you notice that you're starting to get bottom rot tomatoes, then what I would do is I would soak the eggshells in warm water first, kind of get that calcium to get into that water, and then water your tomatoes with the diluted eggshell water. So that will actually kind of get down in the roots. I just use the eggshells because I start it early in the season, and then that helps, like when it rains, the rainwater kind of helps the calcium break down into the eggs or into the roots, and also it just keeps the eggshells right around the plants and helps them. The second fertilizer, homemade fertilizer that I do for my tomato plants is a banana peel and my coffee grounds, used coffee grounds. So typically in the morning when I'm done doing that, I only do it like once a week, not even that. At the beginning, when I first plant them, I might do it once a week, but now that they're getting bigger, I maybe do it once a month. I don't do it that often anymore, unless I see that the plants are in distress and need some extra food. But what I do with that is, if you've seen my short on it, all you do is put the banana peel and coffee grounds in water, let it sit overnight, and then in the morning strain it, and then I dilute it. So then I put half of that mixture into one watering can and half the mixture into another watering can, fill it with water, and then just water the tomato plants. And I have not had to use fertilizer with that mixture and with the eggshells. So it actually is a nice homemade thing that I have found. Doesn't cost anything besides your leftover stuff, which is even more of a benefit. So really the only thing that I purchase is the neem oil, and again, I just used it. Today is probably the first time that I've used it since starting the season because I haven't had a problem. Now, if you wanted to use it as a preventative, you absolutely could start your season and just use it throughout. But I'm checking my tomatoes quite often, and at least weekly, but usually multiple times a week. So if I start seeing it like I did today, then I'll get out and I will spray it right away and get it under control before it gets bad. The problem, if you just let it go, then it can get awful and completely destroy your plants. So I like to try to at least stay on top of it as soon as I see it and take care of it. But that is it. That is how I take care of my tomato plants, and how what I have learned just even in the year. This is my second year doing it, and that's what I've learned, and what has been super helpful for us to get a ton of tomatoes, so I can can my sauce and diced tomatoes, whole tomatoes, ketchup, salsa, all of the things that you can think of for tomatoes I like to do because it's nice to have them in the pantry. So there you go. If those were great tips for you, please let me know. Drop them in the comments below. And if you want more tips as I'm learning things throughout the garden experience and want to see what we're doing on the homestead, please subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time.